Howdy kids, it's time to talk about board games, and specifically board games that play well with two players. As some of you may know, I'm very passionate about board games, and one of the most commonly asked questions I get is what games work best with two players? Now there are a lot of great two-player games out there. I am not going to go over all of them. I'm going to go over 25 of them though, and these are my personal favorites. I've also done the due diligence of categorizing them into 3 categories, 2 smaller categories and 1 bigger category. The first category, exactly 2-player games. There'll be only like 4 of those. The next small category, 2 players, or you can play it solo, which about 3 games fit that. And the rest of them play great with 2, but you can play with more if you want. I've also, because I'm so generous, sorted in each category the games by complexity level based off their ratings on Board Game Geek. Each game title is going to have a decimal next to them. That's their complexity rating. 1 to 2 is very light, 2 to 3 is light to mid-range, 3 to 4 is gets a little heavier. So just keep that in mind. So if you're somebody who's looking for, lighter games, you're going to want to start at the beginning of each category, and if you're like, give me that heavy shit, dog, you can watch on and onward and as they get heavier and heavier and thicker. And this is getting weird. I'm also not going to go into every single game in depth on the rules, just give a sort of a brief description of the game. Because we got a lot of games to cover here. So let's go. First off, the exactly 2 players category. These only play 2, just so you know. If you have your friends over, fuck them. Only 2. The first game is a very light game called Patchwork. Essentially, what you're doing is you're taking turns, grabbing these like quilt pieces, and you're filling up your board with these Tetris-like pieces to the best of your ability without wasting space. The patch pieces also have buttons on them, and at the end of the game, whoever has the most buttons in their income or button income wins the game. Very simple, very easy to learn, and plays very quickly, so highly recommended. The next game is Undaunted Normandy. Now, I'm going to be doing a review of this at some point. God, I'm so behind, but this was sent to me for review. It's a fantastic game, but basically, it's a light deck building game and a tactical sort of like war game, where basically you have your deck of soldiers you recruit, and you're playing as either the US or Germany in World War II. You play your cards to move your troops around the field, take people out with dice rolls. It's very tactical and very, very fun. I don't want to go into everything, because again, I'll be reviewing this later, but it features a full campaign, and it's also actually very respectful of the subject matter. This isn't just like, I don't know, some dumb Call of Duty Zombies shit, where you're just like, World War II is fun. It has like a very respectful tone to it, and it's kind of like historically focused, so if you're worried about the theme, I think it treats it pretty respectfully. I will say, if you love games like Fire Emblem, this game gives me the feel of like a Fire Emblem game, but with a light deck building mechanic instead. Really loved this. I played the whole campaign through. I'd love to play it again as the other side at some point, but yeah, Undaunted Normandy. Next up, we got a game called Targi. This is a game with a theme based on the Tuareg people, which are a semi-nomadic Muslim group of people who live in this, predominantly the Sahara, but in other regions as well, and they're also known as the Blue People. This game features a grid of actions, and what I love about this game is you're basically putting down your meeples, and wherever you put down a meeple, your opponent cannot put a meeple there, or in a space facing that meeple. And where you put down 2 meeples, and wherever they intersect, and wherever they're placed, you get to do those actions. This is one of the most elegant 2-player games I've ever played. I love that mechanic of kind of blocking each other while also making sure you get the actions you need for specific goals you might have. Because you're trying to play these tribal cards and you'll need certain goods and things to do that. But yeah, the theme is cool and the gameplay is just elegant. I love this game. I highly recommend it. Now let's jump up in complexity here. This is Twilight Struggle. Now, this game has a reputation for being a very complicated game. But when I played it, I was very surprised. It's actually not as complex as people make it out to be. But essentially what it is you're playing as either the US or the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And it's a historical war game with cards and stuff. And basically, you're just competing for control over the entire world. The game is very heavily historically based. All the cards and stuff are based on real events in history. So actually, if you're very familiar with the Cold War, that will give you an actual advantage because you know how progression of the war went. as time went on, and events in the game will reflect that based on the cards. Now, don't get me wrong, this game is not for everybody. It is intense. You gotta learn a lot, and it's a lot to look at and set up, but once you play it, it's a pretty, like, accessible, card-driven, like, haha, I'll play this, fuck you, oh yeah, well, I'll play this, sort of game. It's great. I really enjoyed the experience, and if you like those beefy games, and even if you feel like you're not someone who would like a big war game, this one is lighter than you might think, even though it's not a light game, but I think you should give it a try. I encourage people to give it a try because it is pretty damn fun, and it looks very inaccessible and dry and like, oh god, I don't want to play that. I felt the same way, but I really enjoyed it. Alright, new category. These next few games are games that can be played 2-player or solo. So if your partner or friend or whatever doesn't feel like playing, you can play on your own. You don't need them. First off, we have One Deck Dungeon. This is a very light sort of dice rolling RPG with a deck of monsters you fight. And what's cool about it is you're sort of matching these dice to different objectives on each monster or obstacle. And the more you can fill, the less damage you take, and the more successful you are. And then you choose whether you take those monsters as either experience or skills or items, and you can beef up your characters. Each character has like a different abilities depending on their class. It's really fun, and you know, it's fun chucking a bunch of colorful dice and trying to like strategize placement of them. Yeah, it's really fun, and I haven't played it solo, but I will say as a 2-player game, it's really fun, even though it's pretty hard. But yeah, if you like dungeon crawls and want something sort of light, yeah, it's fun going down deeper and deeper into the deck of the dungeon. Yeah, it's a One Deck Dungeon. Very, very fun. Next up, we got a beefier game. This is Arkham Horror, the card game. Now, this is in the same universe as like Eldritch Horror, Arkham Horror, Mansions of Madness, all those Fantasy Flight Lovecraft games, but this is actually my favorite version of that sort of idea of gameplay. Essentially, you play through a campaign and you can get other campaigns and such as like expansions, but it's very story driven, and you keep your progress through games, and there's a lot of scary shit to uncover. What I like about the card game especially is it manages to do what the other games do with a giant board with cards. It's very elegant in how it's, you know, set up. Like each card is a location, and you know, I don't know, it does a lot with a small package, and I really admire that. So if you want a spooky, tough, Lovecraftian, horror-filled adventure with some pretty fun card play, check out Arkham Horror, the card game. It's great. Next up is one of those big old beefy Uwe Rosenberg action worker placement games, and this one is Fields of Arle. In this game, you are farmers in the peaceful town of Arle in East Frisia, and yep, it's one of those games where you're constructing dikes and making farms and growing livestock and trading and all that farming goodness. If you haven't played one of these games before, they may sound very boring, but if you're someone who enjoys a game like, let's say, Stardew Valley, where you're like, oh yeah, well, I gotta do this so I can grow this, and I can do that, take that, and trade it for this, or turn it into this. These games are basically that in physical form. They're really fun. I'm a big fan of them. This one is great because you're like, you know, making more land as you go and filling it all up. It's very satisfying in that Stardew Valley sort of way. I find that oftentimes with his games, they look more complicated than they actually are. Once you get the hang of the actions, they're pretty like accessible, I think. Of course, I wouldn't recommend this to, you know, a beginning board gamer, but if you've played a few games and you want to try one, this is a pretty solid one, and I do like that it's 2 players because you can directly compare each other's farms. And I will say, I completely kicked the ass of my friend when I played this. His was the Pawnee to my Eagleton. Alright, now we're on our final category. These are all games that I think play great with 2, but they can play with more. If you're worried about, oh, like I want to be able to, you know, have flexibility, right? Like I don't want to just be able to only play with 2. These games are perfect for you. And some of you may argue, what? That works better with 3 or whatever. I don't care. I have played a lot of these with 2, and they work great. First off, we have Escape the Dark Castle. Now, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, because I have a board game review of it, episode 65, check that out. But basically, you're going through these very gorgeously spooky story cards, and you're rolling dice to try to, like, get past them. It very much has the feel of like a roguelike, of okay, we just gotta get by on the skin of our teeth, roll the dice, oh, that was the bad roll. Very light, but very engaging and very well written, too. So, highly recommend it. Great atmosphere to the game, Escape the Dark Castle. The next game is the 2-player variant of a very popular series, Codenames. This is Codenames Duet. And if you haven't played Codenames, essentially, you've got a grid of words, and you're trying to silently tell your partner to which words to pick based off a clue. Like you might say, I don't know, fuzzy 3 to connect 3 words. But the trick is, in Codenames and in Codenames Duet, there are words that you don't want them to touch. There's a kill word, where if your partner touches that, you lose the game instantly. And also, if they touch the wrong word other than that, they have to stop immediately and it wastes a turn. And in Codenames Duet, efficiency is all is what the game is. Since you're not playing against another team, you're trying to you're trying to win in as few moves as possible. This makes for a very different but still very fun experience of Codenames. Like, instead of kind of like a raucous party game, this version is very thinky and very like, okay, I need to figure out like what will be the best person or best clue for this person, and I want to make sure I maximize the amount of the clues so that we don't waste time. It's a very fun, almost like relationship exercise, or like routine building exercise, or I guess a duo building exercise, because you really start to understand how the other person thinks. Especially, and I would highly recommend this, especially if you know the other person really well. Like, I play this with my wife, and sometimes it's frustrating, but overall it's fun, because it's like, okay, I know exactly how she thinks, or I think I do, and this game will help you kind of discover that. Now, the next game may surprise you, because usually you play this with a lot of people, but I'm going to say it, Magic Maze. Magic Maze is a game where you're in it's a weird theme. You're like fantasy people in like a shopping mall, and you're trying to do like a heist or something stupid, and you're trying to get them to their goals and get them out. The theme is whatever. Basically, the idea of the game is that you each have actions that only you can do, like move them left and up, or go up escalators. I forget the exact actions. But the trick is, you can't talk. So, you have to silently communicate with each other as to what will be the best way to move these characters. Because a lot of the times it's like, okay, I can only move right, and my partner can only move up. So it's like, okay, I move, you move, I move, you move. Extremely teamwork centric. Oh, by the way, there's a time limit. So it's a very tense game, but you can talk if you go on a certain space, in which case you can go, okay, if we're going to do this and this and this and this, and try to plan as quickly as possible because the timer is still going. Normally, with like a big group, each person only has one action, but actually playing it 2-player is really fun in almost a Codenames Duet sort of way. Because you have a set number of actions and the other player has a set number of actions, it can be very satisfying if you can coordinate your teamwork. Because it just becomes almost like this mind, like, connecting, like, okay, we're on this, what's that Pacific Rim shit where you're docking or whatever the fuck. You're like, yeah, we're working together in parallel, like, we're going great. Like, we're reading each other's minds. If you want a game like that where you can, like, kind of silently, triumphantly maneuver these pieces around perfectly together in a very cooperative way, Magic Maze is fun. Plus, if you want to play it as the big goofy party game, that's also an option to you. Alright, the next game is a game called Potion Explosion. This game has great toy value, first of all. You have this awesome little like tray where you put marbles in and they fall down these rows. And all you're doing in this game is you pick up marbles from columns, and if you pick out a marble and the same color marbles hit each other, you get those marbles too. It feels like a really fun app, and I think there is an app of this, but come on, look at that. The toy value is great. But yeah, you're taking these marbles and you're filling up these potions, and if you brew these potions, the potions can be drunk for special powers, which can help you fill your other potions faster, and you're essentially racing to complete the potions. It's very simple, but very engaging for what it is. Plus, watching those marbles fall down and click together is just great. So again, Potion Explosion, really cute and really fun. The next game is that modern classic Azul. If you don't know what Azul is, it's a tile sort of drafting game where you're picking tiles up from these circles and you're putting them in rows to try to fill up a grid. That's a very vague way of putting it. I don't feel like explaining exactly how the game plays, but essentially you're just trying to grab the right colored tiles to fill rows without overfilling your rows, because if you do, you lose points. And you're trying to like connect certain squares on your grid so that they'll combo each other. Like if I have a square here and a square here and I put a square between them, I'll get more points that way. There's a reason this game is so popular. There are also sequels to it. I haven't played the third one, but the second one is really good. You like that one even better. But Azul, if you haven't played it, really great. And the tiles are great, have a great feel to them and elegant look. There's a reason this is a classic, or a modern classic, because it's very well designed. And if you like it, the next one is even better. So, Azul. The next game is a roll and write game that's called That's Pretty Clever, or Ganz schön clever in the original German. When I say roll and write, you have sheets of paper as your board, and what you're doing is you're crossing out things and writing down numbers as you roll dice. Each colored dice corresponds to a different sort of like almost mini game. Like some games you're like writing numbers in a row, or some games you're crossing out things, and you're just trying to get points. That may sound vague as fuck, but trust me, this is an addicting game. And if you like this game, the sequel also works good with 2 players, twice as clever. It's a little more complicated. I like both, and I think both are worth having because it's just like 2 versions of a great game, and they're different enough that I think they're worth both getting. If you like something like Yahtzee, this is like the next step up, and it's way more fun, even though Yahtzee's pretty fun, but this game is great. And I think one of the best roll and writes out there. Alright, next up is this pretty game called Sagrada. Sagrada is a game where you're taking translucent colored dice and you're putting them in a stained glass formation, but there are rules. You can't have the same color or same number next to each other. Plays very quickly. There are like special tools you can use to like manipulate the rules, and also it's just a simple drafting game. I pick a die, you pick a die, back and forth, filling up your grid. And there's that great puzzle game aspect of, it's so frustrating, I really want to fill this, I gotta make sure I grab this dice, but like, if I don't grab that one, then they're gonna grab that. Great drafting game, great puzzle game, and it's pretty too, on top of that, Sagrada. Next up is a very popular deck building game called Ascension. If you like Magic the Gathering, this game was designed by Magic the Gathering champions. I will say, theme-wise and even artwork-wise, I am completely neutral. It's really, for me, all about just pure playing cards and doing combos. Because this is the first game to feature, like, a marketplace of cards where you can, like, buy cards from a sort of like a row and add them to your deck as you go. And this game plays fast. You can play a game in 20 minutes. You can play several rounds, just like that. I have a review of Delirium, one of the sets in episode 76 of my board game reviews, if you want to check out exactly how to play. But it's the very simple, like, play currency, you buy cards, and play swords, you kill monsters and get rewards. Really easy to learn gameplay, really fast, and I love the breeziness of it. Like, it's so simple. I'll also say, I'll only play this with 2 people. I think more just makes it too long. This is a perfect 2-player game. The next 2 games are going to follow a similar theme of deck building games, but I'll only play with 2 pretty much. And the next one is Mystic Vale. Now this one is unique in that it has a card crafting system, where you have these like sort of sleeve cards, and you can slide segments in them to make the card custom as you go. I forget the theme, it's like your druids or something, some wizard shit, I don't know, whatever. But I don't care. The gameplay is what I like. And it's fun, you're making your custom cards. Like, you've made your custom decks, now it's time for custom cards. And then you play those cards to get Veil cards and other advancements and sort of things. Again, not complicated to learn. And I think the card crafting system is genius. Like, it's a very unique aspect of this game, and I think it really works. So, if you want sort of like a twist on the deck building genre, where you're like, I want to customize it even more. try Mystic Vale. The next game is my favorite board game of all time, and that is Legendary, specifically Marvel Legendary, but I will say Legendary Aliens is also really, really good. The cooperative game, again, I think best with two, where you are getting heroes from a market and adding them to your deck, and each scenario or scheme you play is completely unique. And there are so many expansions for this game. I own all of them. I'm itching to play. There's like 2 of them I haven't played yet, but I have beaten every single scenario in this, and I'm astounded at how unique they are, considering this game is all just cards on a board. But basically, you use your you play your cards, and you're doing like color combos to like trigger combos, and you're taking out villains as they run through the city, and at the same time you're trying to beat the mastermind who, if you beat them like 4 times, you win the game. And at the same time, there's every scenario has different objectives, different sort of defeat conditions. There's a ton of variety in this game, and if you get a couple of expansions, even like the base game and like 1 expansion, you'll have a lot of variety. And if you're like me and use a randomizer, every game is unique. As far as deck building goes, this is easily my favorite. I love the mechanics of like, okay, if I play this card says if I played a green card, then I can like get this bonus, and then this card, oh, I played 2 of these, you just trigger and trigger and trigger. And because it's cooperative, every time someone pulls off a crazy combo, everybody wins. It's not like, oh, I gotta wait like for this bozo to finish his turn. No, you're happy because you want them to have a good turn because you're working together. And if you don't like the Marvel theme, then the Alien set is much harder, but there's interesting mechanics to make it very different, but I recommend that as well. There are actually a lot of different themes for this game. So if you don't like Marvel or Aliens, I'm sure there's something. I haven't tried the other ones, but they're all the same system. So, overall, Legendary as a whole, really fun. I can't vouch for anything beyond Alien and Marvel, but those 2 rule. And even if you don't like Marvel, I still think you'll enjoy the game. It's just a great game. Alright, next up is Zombicide Black Plague. I'm also including Green Horde, which is like the sequel to that. Now, I think people might go, what? 2 players? What? Isn't it best like 3 or even more? It plays great with all counts, I think, but I will say, there's a friend of mine and I know this game so well that we have such a great time playing it 2-player. In 2-player, you take control of 3 characters each, which sounds overwhelming, but the game's not that complicated. Essentially, you're going around shooting zombies, killing zombies in a fantasy setting, which I love that it's a fantasy setting. That's why I prefer Black Plague over like the original. It's dice chucking and running around and, getting away by the skin of your teeth and, using cool abilities. But at the same time, it does have kind of like a fun strategic Euro feel, because there is a sense of like, okay, I gotta move here because the zombies will go here, and we don't want to die because if you die, your character is dead. And you don't want that. There are a ton of scenarios in the booklet. We've played through pretty much all of them and all the expansions. We're currently going through some of the later expansions right now. But this works great with pretty much any player count, but I think it works great with 2. If you learn how to play and get the hang of it, three characters is like a no-brainer. And you might even go, I kind of prefer this way because I have more control over what's going on, if you're somebody like me. But as far as dice-chucking zombie games go, this is one of my favorite games of all time. I love Black Plague. Green Horde is even better, just even harder. Next up, we have the Exit series. These are escape room games, and if you want to see a review, I did episode 62 of my board game reviews, covers one of them, The Pharaoh's Tomb. But essentially, they are one-time only, but escape room games you can play at home. They come in very small boxes, and I can't go into too much detail about them, but I will say they work great with 2 players, especially if you both love puzzles and escape rooms. And yeah, like the puzzles are ingenious. They really have like a almost meta way of looking at like board games and what a board game is. I feel like each game I play in the series has always like 1 or 2 like like oh shit moments. And if you want that and want that experience of solving puzzles and cooperating to solve puzzles, then I highly recommend Exit. They're fantastically designed. Fun themes, too. Really, really good shit. The next one is an old favorite of mine. This is Seasons. Seasons is a card drafting game where you're playing as... You're like wizards in a tournament that takes place over like 3 years, and you're going through the seasons, which that's why it's called Seasons. And what you're doing is not only are you drafting cards at the beginning, but you're also dice drafting, because each dice has these like symbols on them, and they all do different things, like give you crystals, or let you draw cards, or let you collect energy or elements so that you can play more cards. It's just one of those classic like play cards and try to do combos off of them. But at the same time, there's this fun feel of like each turn you're upgrading in some way, because like you can only play a certain number of cards based off your summoning gauge, and to increase your summoning gauge, you got to draft the right dice. So it's got that sort of gotcha, like I'll take this dice before somebody else can mechanic, while also that great feeling of like, okay, if I play this card, then I play this card, then that triggers that effect, and that's great. I've played it with multiple player counts, but I think if you have one other person, it makes it a lot faster. A lot of these card-driven games, I feel, are fun and good with more players, but 2 players is the best. The game doesn't drag on long, and you get the same exact amount of enjoyment, just in a more compact, direct sort of way. A lot of deck building games, because I love deck building games, and this one is Aeon's End. You can see my review of one of the sets in episode 67 of the board game reviews. But Aeon's End is a cooperative deck building game where in this game you actually don't shuffle your deck, which is a great mechanic. This allows you to kind of like strategize placement of cards in your discard pile, because once you are done with your deck, you just take your discard pile, flip it over, draw again, and so you can know kind of what's coming. You're using those cards to buy cards from a market, and you're casting spells to fight off this giant monster and his deck of like evil minions and traps and horrible things that he shoots at you. It's tough, but it's fair. And if you love that sort of, oh man, we gotta work hard together because otherwise we're fucked, this is a great game for that. Also, like Legendary, you can just swap in expansion cards very easily. Like I have every set, and I'll keep ordering every set because I love this game that much. This also has a cool mechanic where the turn order isn't set, it's a deck of cards. So like when you draw a card, you'll see it's player 1 or player 2 or the monster. And I will only play this with 2. I think this plays best with 2. Otherwise, it gets a little weirdly imbalanced, I feel. 2 is like the perfect sweet spot for this. The next game, again, is another game I'll only play with 2, or I prefer highly with 2, and that's a game called Five Tribes. This game features a set of tiles with different colored meeples on them, and it has a Mancala sort of gameplay where you pick up meeples and then you drop them on spaces, but wherever your last meeple goes, it has to the color of it has to match colors on that tile, because then what you do is you pick up the same colored meeples, and then you do the actions based on what the colors are. Some of them score you points, some of them kill other meeples, some of them get you money or goods, and basically you're just trying to like gain control over certain over tiles throughout the game. I'm not going to go into all the details of the rules, but that Mancala aspect of pick up meeples, drop, 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 boom, get these, get effects. Very satisfying. And I think playing it with 2 mitigates any randomness you would have from like a 4-player game. Because if you play a 4-player game, there are like 3 other turns and then the board might be completely different from when you last looked at it. But if it's a 2-player game, they got a turn and it's back to you, and you can go right back to what you were trying to do. Elegant design, really attractive artwork. I think it looks great too. Fantastic little game, Five Tribes. Now we're getting into the kind of beefier games. This one is Grand Austria Hotel. I think this one works great with 2. And basically in this, you own a hotel and you're managing staff and trying to like please guests and fill up rooms. You roll dice and the dice correspond to different actions. And depending on how many dice there are on actions, you might get more if you choose that action. So it's an action drafting game, and then there's like, if you complete orders for guests, you can get bonus actions. It's one of those kind of games, but the theme is fun. I enjoy, filling up the rooms and, feeling more and more successful as you go on. But yeah, I also enjoy those kind of like dice rolling action-based games. So if you like those kind of games, this is a great one. The next game is a beefy game, but it's a great one, and this game is called Underwater Underwater Cities. Now, if you ever played Bioshock and thought to yourself, you know, besides all the objectivism and the murder and the crazy people, running an underwater city seems pretty fun. If you thought that, then this is the game for you. You're trying to form this city and make kelp farms and desalination things, and you're trying to, like, you know, make sure your people have enough food and water, and the main core of the game are actions and cards. And this game has a great sort of system where you have different colored cards, and if the card you play matches the color of the action, not only do you get to trigger the action, but you get the effect of the card as well. So it's a card placement, action placement game with card play. It's great. You're just collecting resources, building and upgrading your buildings, and trying to get those cards, because those cards are so great, and there's so many different types, but it's really satisfying. Like, okay, if I play this here, let's get the juicy card effect, and I get exactly what I want. And you're just competing for actions. And in a two-player game, it's great. I don't know if I would play this with more, because again, it would take too long, I feel. It's a pretty long game. So, if that sounds fun to you, the idea of managing an underwater city and playing cards and getting cool actions, Underwater Cities is fantastic. And finally, this is probably the beefiest game in the whole video. This is Star Wars Rebellion. In this game, you play as the Rebels or the Empire, and it's this massive, sprawling war game. And what's cool is that it's completely asymmetric. So, if you are the Rebels, you have a much smaller army, but your objectives are, you're trying to do like missions, sort of like sabotage missions, and pushing this sort of objective marker further and further. Because if you manage to push it to a certain point, you win the game. But you can only do this by doing secret tasks. Meanwhile, as the Empire, you have this huge army, and you're all about generating tons of troops. But what you're doing is you're searching this entire galaxy board for the Rebel base. It's a one giant game of hide and seek, and if you can find the Rebel base and take it, then you win. I don't even like Star Wars, and I thought this game was fantastic. Now, if you like Star Wars, this game's gonna make you jizz your pants. It's basically like playing your own version of like the original trilogy, right? It's got all the characters, but you can, like, you know, kind of like funny shit can happen. Like in one game, I was the Rebels and my opponent was the Empire, and they like brainwashed Chewbacca. Like, funny things can happen in that regard, so you can get a kick out of that. But, you know, there's card play, because you have, you know, different things you can play to, like, go, aha, well, how about this? It's got a ton of gorgeous minis, and it's a lot in a box. It's a pretty big box, a pretty heavy game, but once you learn it and play it, you'll have a great time. It's very satisfying, and at the very least, it's going to be a memorable game. Especially if you're a Star Wars fan and like these kind of heavy board games, it's a no-brainer, for sure. Alright, that was 25 two-player games ranging in all sorts of complexity. Now I'll never have to answer this question again. I'm just going to link to this video. And yeah, now, there are games I did not mention. It's not because I don't like them. Either I haven't played them, or they didn't make the 25. But there are, I know for a fact, other great two-player games. And you know what? You can comment and recommend them yourself, you dingus. Then people can get more than 25 games out of this. Go look at the comments. I'm sure it's full of great suggestions for games I didn't mention, and don't get on my ass about not including them. These are my 25. I actually had to cut some from the list to squeeze it down to 25. So, anyway, that's my list. Have fun. Go play some board games with another person and have a good time. Yeah.